Hello fellow adventurers and collectors, Filmaholic here. On today's episode of the Joe Report, we've kind of got a special edition in that we're going to be looking at the Takara side of G.I. Joe. Now, we all know G.I. Joe, at least those of you who are in the collecting space or have watched the channel for a while, should know who G.I. Joe is. Released in 1964, he basically was the creation or starting point for the action figures that we know today, right? So, that being said, Hasbro, without missing a beat and not wanting to miss the opportunity to capitalize on it, they started to license him out to other manufacturers in different countries around the world. And that being said, in Japan, not only did they release what we know as G.I. Joe, but they also released what was known as Takara New G.I. Joe. Now, that new moniker is important to look at because it was their basically owning of the name in the sense that that was their new design. And as you can see here, it looks very different from what we are familiar with here in the United States. So, in order to fit their demographics and their needs, they restyled him to look more like an anime character. And funnily enough, I was watching a series or a short video on some animation, and I was watching it without any, necessarily connection to it. But sure enough, when I'm watching it, they have an American soldier, right? And I look at it, and it looks very similar to what this guy would look like. So that gives you an idea of what they were going for in terms of the styling of this. So now, the timeline for this is very fast in the sense that it wasn't on the market for very long before they also added this head sculpt, which was their German soldier, I believe, and that was the only release that they came out with in this style of headset. And it's a very unique look. Again, it's definitely different from what we're used to here in the United States, so it's a nice piece to have, and one that I wish I had more of, but these are a lot harder to come by than the typical Takara New G.I. Joe. So, that being said, this one I found through a mislabeled listing, and I was able to add it to the collection. Now, of course, Takara followed along with other, manufacturers like Palitoy in the sense that they also released flocked versions of them, and as the line went on, they ventured out into, different sports and things like that, whereas G.I. Joe kind of stuck with the military theme for a while. But that being said, the next evolution for Takara New G.I. Joe is what is known as Combat Joe. That incorporated 2 new head sculpts and kind of started to branch out the line in the sense of getting away from the typical structure of the G.I. Joe body, and the DNA of that kind of drifted away from what it originally once was. I unfortunately don't have them, but I know Jeff at Skunkworks does a lot of extensive videos on them, so if you're familiar with his channel, I'd highly recommend looking into those videos because they very much showcase the unique look that they have. Now, with that being said, I love Takara G.I. Joe, and I'm always looking for new ones, but it's hard to come by. So when I found out that White Elephant Toys actually released a reproduction head, I figured it would be the perfect opportunity to get more Takara G.I. Joes in my collection. Now, I also wanted to get these 2 head sculpts because they're different in the sense that they're not exactly one-to-one remakes of the original Takara G.I. Joe, and I'm not too sure where I land on whether or not I like that direction, but nonetheless, they are great head sculpts. They definitely have a unique look to them compared to the original. And as you can see here, it's more or less just how narrow the head is compared to how thick the original is. And also it's missing some paint details in terms of the lips, along with the highlight in the eyes. But those are all minute details. If you're looking for a Takara G.I. Joe, these are a great alternative to that, and definitely cheaper to get one into your collection this way. But I wanted to bring these up in particular because, 1, I figured it would be good to customize, new characters with them. But 2, I figured it'd be a good way to kind of fill in the gaps that I'm missing in my current collection. For example, this brown head sculpt, I think I'm going to paint his eyes brown because later down the line when they started to branch out from Combat Joe, they had a line that is known as Henshin Cyborg. And in that line, Takara G.I. Joe was basically the body that you would get, and they would come with different costumes and things like that to showcase different monsters and things that Japan liked at the time. But in that line, he had brown eyes, and I have yet to actually come across a vintage brown-eyed Takara G.I. Joe. It's just that rare, and I figured at the meantime I can at the very least paint this brown haired head sculpt with brown eyes. But yeah, that being said, I know, or at least I recall in one of the Cotswold videos, I think the one about this series of G.I. Joe, they had mentioned that White Elephant Toys was looking at making the Lily Lady G.I. Joe head sculpt, and I'd be interested in that. But I'd also want to point out that there is also that other German soldier head sculpt I think should be remade as well. I think that's a missed opportunity. If they can get a hold of that in some way or form, I think it would be good to pair up with this reproduction. But yeah, that being said, I do plan on at least getting another brown haired head sculpt, because there's another flocked haired version that just doesn't have a beard, and I want that version. That one's hard to come by, so I figured at the very least it'd be good to get a reproduction of it. But yeah, that being said, I'm going to leave a bunch of resources down below. I know it's hard to get a hold of, everything together, and this is by no means the end-all be-all video for Takara G.I. Joe, but at least it's a starting point for you to dive into it yourself or find out some more information if you're curious enough, So check out the links below. I'm sure it's going to be interesting to see, what everyone thinks about that. So yeah, with that being said, I appreciate you guys checking this video out, and if you feel so inclined, please like, comment, and or subscribe. I'd very much appreciate it. I'll catch you all next time. Take care.